wonderful day to be in the house of the Lord with all of you beautiful people. First and foremost, I want to give honor to our pastor and first lady. You know, they give us every ounce that they have. I mean, if you didn't know that last month, October, was Pastor's Appreciation Month, it was, but we appreciate our pastor every moment of every day and every month. It's insane the amount that they do for us. And I'm so thankful to be finally in November, 2 months left of 2020. It felt like 20 months, but here we are, finally, month 11. When you have pastors like ours, we try to thank them and appreciate them as much as possible. So if you see them today, at least give them a fist bump and thank you for all you do. You should do that all the time. But we just love you and we thank you for all that you do. Again, a month is just not enough to thank them, ever, for anything. And I honestly don't know if there's adequate amount of time to show appreciation to our pastors, but we'll take all the time. But I do want to honor them for allowing me, as well as the other speakers, the time to pour our hearts and our energy into you guys. We don't take that lightly. Today, we're going to be talking about Samson. I know I talked about him a while back, but I'm bringing him back up because I was reading again, and something clicked for me. If you're already an expert on Samson, I'm really sorry. I'm going to bore you to tears. But if you're not, if you're like me and you're not an expert on them, then you might learn something this morning with me. Obviously, like normal, buckle up your seatbelt and get ready for this wild ride. So, the beginning of Samson is found in chapter 3 of Judges. Here we find Manoah and his wife. This is his mother. So Manoah was barren, which means she couldn't have children. And one day, an angel of God appeared to Manoah's wife and promised that she would bear a son. But this comes with a warning. She cannot contaminate her body. She could not drink alcohol because her child would be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from birth. She also learns that her son will save the Israelites from the Philistines. And Samson's destiny and his connection to the Philistines is explicitly laid out by God before he was even born, before he was even in the womb. His destiny was laid out. After Samson's birth, the Bible directly throws us into his adult life. So we miss this whole entire section of his life. Childhood, teenage, all those bad years. So we just get to assume that he was this perfect child. Okay, we get to assume the best because you never assume the worst about people, okay? You assume the best. So Judges 15:9 reads, Then the Philistines went up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves in Lehi. Oh, I can't really pronounce that. And the men of Judah said, Why have ye come up against us? And they answered, To bind Samson, and we come up to do him what he has done to us. Okay, so weird verse of scripture to just jump into if you don't read back and figure out what was happening, right? So first things first, before Samson had already, before this moment, Samson had burned all of the crops of the Philistines by tying 2 foxes together and setting them on fire, okay? So these cute little animals, he tied them together, lit them on fire, and put them in a field and burned the fields. So maybe he wasn't a really good child all this time, but he was destined to defeat the Philistines, okay? So that's just his method of choice. There we go. So then the Philistines retaliated by killing his family in Judges 15:6-7. So Samson lights some stuff on fire. Philistines kill his family. Cool. What's next? Then in verse 8, Samson retaliates and kills pretty much all of the Philistines that lived on a cleft of rock in the city of Etam, E-T-A-M. We're just going to go through these city names. It is what it is. So here we are with the tribe of Judah, where the Philistines are angered and they want justice. So let's recap this story, just so you can follow this thread of this storyline. Samson is a child of God and is destined to destroy the Philistines. And he decides, in his adulthood, he's going to burn some stuff. Cool. Philistines retaliate and kill his family. At what point did they feel that killing his family was adequate to justify the burning stuff? Not sure. Okay, so fire, family dies, then a bunch of people in a city die. And here we are now, the Philistines are coming to get him and bind him for what he has done. So now that we're all on the same page, that's where we are. So in 1511, it says, then 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock of Etam. Okay, we've got one man named who? Samson. Okay, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm teaching a real class. So if you echo back what I taught to you, it'd be real nice. So who are we talking about? Samson. Love it. Okay, so we've got Samson, one man on this rock that has killed all these people. And the Philistines sent in 3,000. And not 3,000 Philistines. 3,000 men of the city of Judah, which is where Samson is from. So 3,000 of his own people came to get him. Weird. So the Philistines then tell him, do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? He's like, hey, dude, don't you realize that the people that you're killing and making mad are the people who are making all the rules? The people who are feeding us, the people who are taking care of us? I don't care that they're bad people. I don't care that the Philistines are terrible and they literally hate our existence. But do you realize that, they make the rules? And what's funny is, it didn't matter. The Philistines were literally the number one enemy of the Israelites, the people of God. Those people of Judah still went to go grab Samson and say, you did wrong, and we want you to, we're going to take care of this. So the story continues. What is that thou hast done unto us? And Samson then says to them, as they did unto me, so I have done unto them. So the Bible talks about the vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? So that means that when something happens to you, it's not your job to retaliate. It's your job to show grace and mercy. Doesn't matter what it is, you're turning the other cheek. It doesn't call you to turn a fist. It calls you to turn a cheek. So here, Samson was the one that first did something, right? He had the fire. Then they killed his family. Then he killed some people, and now they're here to get him. And so at this moment, his first response was, well, they did this to me, and I only did to them what they did to me. And to me, that sounds very childish. That sounds very kindergarten, first grade. Well, why did you slap so-and-so in the face? Well, because so-and-so bit my arm. Well, okay. Well, then why did you bite so-and-so? Well, so-and-so called me a loser. Things seem to escalate whenever we start blaming others for what's going on. Instead of, sometimes there's just a situation and you're called to a moment to do something, and it's not to blame someone else. If I were Samson, I feel like my voice should not have said, because they did unto me. My voice should have said, because God has called me. Because though it was him killing people, he was called to end the time of the Philistines. That was his calling. That's how it was in the Bible. But instead of saying, I'm doing this because this is my calling, I'm doing it because they did to me. When you do things, you should never do because someone else did. I'm not going to be gracious to someone because they were gracious first. I was called to be gracious to begin with. So whether this person hates me or not, I'm going to love on them and I'm going to be with them because that's what I'm called to do. If they lash back in hate, I'm going to lash back in love. And then I'm going to go pray about it because it's never fun, but it's what we're called to do. So then it continues in 15:12. And they said unto him, we are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee into the hand of the Philistines. And Samson said unto them, swear unto me that ye will not fall upon me yourselves. So then he says, that's fine. Take me, whatever. Just don't kill me yourself. Let it be a Philistine's hand that I fall by. So I'm thinking okay, so here you are. You're going to let this 3,000 people of your own people take you and go back to them. Then what? What is your plan? Are you just going to die gracefully? Are you going to try and slew more Philistines? Where's the hammer that drops here? Because there's something that's not lining up. Not for me, at least. But the story does continue. In 15:13 it says, and they spake unto him, saying, no, but we will bind thee fast and deliver thee into their hands, but surely we will not kill thee. And they bound him with 2 new cords and brought him up from the rock. In 15:14 it says, and when he came into Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily unto him. And the cords that were upon his arms became of flax, and they were burnt with fire. And his hands loosed from the bands loosed off his hands. In 15:15 it says, And he found a new jawbone of a donkey and put forth his hand and took and slew 1,000 men therewith. So he says, yes, bind me up. And I'm like, okay, I got you. You're going to break those binds. There's something coming. So then he gets down there. The stuff that he began with, fire, those things on his arms were melted like they were on fire, which is really cool, relation for me, but whatever. So fire burnt kind of the cords on his hands. And then he found something that was dead. Something that was dead in an animal that nobody really liked, a donkey, you know what the Bible really calls it? Okay, so he finds that jawbone, and he slays 1,000 men from a donkey, from a dead donkey, from the mouth. Sometimes the words that you hear from those that are dead to you or those that have hurt you or those that don't make sense can kill a lot of other things that you need to go. That's just how it goes. So he picked up this jaw. Okay, so that's the jaw of a donkey. It's really ugly. I don't know. I didn't put the front cap on it because it's kind of creepy. But it curves up, kind of like a boomerang. And so when I visually see this, I see this big burly man grabbing this jawbone and just slinging it around and just killing all these people. And so it drastically changed the dimension whenever he decided to do this. He grabbed the jawbone and he killed it. But it could have been any other bone. It could have been any other thing that was around him. But instead, he grabbed the jawbone of a donkey, the cheekbone of a donkey. I feel like God specifically led Samson to grab that jawbone because a jawbone is the reason you can speak. You might be able to mumble some stuff, but you can't speak accurately without a jawbone. You can't. It's not a thing. So he grabs this jawbone, and for me, that tells me even if I've died or something has happened to me or I feel like I've been a donkey, my jawbone can still be used. Your jawbone can still be used. It might not be by you. It might be by someone else. But the legacy that you've played before you, what you've done, what you sowed, will still live on. But this isn't the only instance that bones are used. It's not. And if anyone remembers the story of Elisha, in Ezekiel 37, you can find the full story. But for time's sake, I'm going to paraphrase it. Basically, Elisha has a vision of a valley of bones, okay? So he's dreaming, and God asks him if the bones could live. And Elisha responds with, only you would know that. Then God tells him to prophesy to the bones and say, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. And basically commands life into these bones. Which, after Elisha does that, he hears sounds rattling, and the bones were literally revived with flesh on them, and he had an army at his disposal. Can you visualize that? You're dreaming, and then God's like, there's some bones there, okay? So he says, can these bones live? And you're like, I don't know, God. Can they live? Wink, wink. What do I do? And so God says, tell them to live. Tell them to live. And so Elisha says, hear the word of the Lord. So that jawbone that he used, something you use to speak, speaks life into things too. So just because there's some donkeys there doesn't mean that you can't live life there and actually bring an army to life. A dead army, bones. Flesh literally was put on these bones, and there were living beings in front of him because he decided to obey, use his mouth the way he was supposed to, and follow the word of the Lord. So, in my opinion, that's insane. And then I have to remind myself, no, that's miraculous. In this story, God compared the bones to the people of Israel. And at this moment, the people of Israel were kind of dying. They were in distress. They were so overwhelmed with everything going on. And here he's saying, these are the people, Elisha, that I need you to save. And I need you to be the one to put flesh back on them. Obviously, I'm not here today to put flesh on your body, but I'm here today to give you a little word to maybe encourage you or to push past what's been going on with those donkeys in your life. So, to me, God basically told him, I know you feel dead. I know you currently have no life, But that's what I'm here for. I'm going to revive you, and I'm going to replenish you. Another story where there was seemingly no hope is that of Job. Remember him? Literally had everything taken away from him. And then even his health was compromised, and his wife told him to forsake Jesus. And then I was reading this past week about it again, and I found this moment in it that I always just kind of jumped over. And there was a moment in Job's life where he kind of like second-guessed, just for a second. So in the story of Job, when you get to a certain point and his wife has told him, just forsake God, he says, no, I won't do that. He goes into a moment of prayer where 3 of his friends come and meet with him, okay? His friends come and meet with him to pray with him. So they pray for a week straight, and they're mourning and they're upset. They don't speak a word. And then at the 7th day, Job is so angry. He's so mad at the circumstances that he's had. He questions a lot of things. Then his friends one by one question, why do you even love God? Why is he even there? Don't you know that he's forsaken you? After those 3 seconds, those moments, those minutes, Job stands up and he's furious that his friends dare mourn with him in that way. Because when your friends come to mourn with you, they should be elevating you and not putting you down and not taking what you believe, what they know you believe, and be worse. I don't know about you, but my friends always elevate me. No matter how much of a bad person or witch that I could have been since it's Halloween season, whatever, they will always combat that thought with something else. The people closest to you should be using their jawbone to lift you up. In that moment, Job's friends could have said stuff like, Job, things do happen in life. That's the circle of life. What were the great moments that you had with your family? What were the good? How can we help you? Can we cook for you? Do you want to live with us? Do you want to be with us? But instead, they chose to completely do the opposite and drown him down. I don't know about you, but if I was Job in that situation, I would not be friends with those people anymore. And the Bible doesn't talk about them again, so I'm going to just assume in Natalie's world that they're not friends anymore. And so Job is now living his life. And then after that, then God comes back and he has a conversation with Job, and Job blesses God, and Job is then blessed again. So that little 3 seconds that I always jumped over literally spoke life to me in the last week, because who you choose to be the closest to you really matters. It really does. God still came through for him and was faithful. And sometimes in life, you can be undervalued by those closest to you. And if those closest to you are undervaluing you, you need to get a new set of those who should be close to you. When God has anointing placed on you, you will in fact be brought from the field like David was, and you wouldn't be forgotten. I've talked about David before. He might have felt forgotten in the field away from everyone else, but later in his life, he was called to the front fourth, and he was called to do a job specifically. Like Job was blessed, like Samson was empowered, when he slayed those Philistines, just as the word from Elisha's mouth brought dead bones to life, what God has planned is set. Just stay faithful and obey. Whatever his plan may be and involve, the plan is set in motion, and you just need to follow his will. Does anyone remember the ending of Samson, though? I think this is the coolest part, though grabbing a jawbone of a dead animal and killing a bunch of people is pretty cool, or lighting a whole field on fire with those foxes is cool. To me, this is the coolest part. In spite of his continued directive from God to fight the Philistines, Samson pursued much more personal connection with them. So he wanted to be friends with the Philistines, okay? And he got real friendly with this lady called Delilah, who has been tasked by her people to actually find out why Samson is so strong and what is Samson's Achilles heel, what's going to ruin him. So 3 times she begs him to know the secret of his strength, and 3 times he lies to her. And finally, Delilah nags him so much that he finally tells her, a razor has never come to his head, and for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, then my strength would leave me. And that's in Judges 16:17. Sure enough, Delilah took advantage of this new information, and after Samson fell asleep, she shaved off his head, and immediately he was weakened. He went from this strong, burly person to this bug that could be squashed by anything. He immediately weakens, and God's power leaves him. But Delilah hands Samson over to the Philistines, who gouge out his eyes and force him to grind in a mill in prison. For a second, imagine with me, you're in a room and all the lights go out. It's super uncomfortable. You can't see a thing. Your eyes have not adjusted yet. And the word adjusted to me is just, it's insane, because you can adjust in a good way, you can adjust in a bad way. Someone else can come and adjust your attitude for you, or you can just adjust it yourself. Adjust can be a lot of things. Adjust is not just something. In his life, he decided to divulge the one thing that would be his demise to this woman who didn't really care about him, and that was, in fact, his demise for a while. And then he was stuck in utter darkness. Darkness in literacy, like in stories, is often paired with paranoia, upsetness, just the deepest, hardest moments of someone's life. Like, it's the worst time is always the dark time. But sometimes that dark time is not your worst time, it's your growth time. So for me, in my dark times, I push through and I do things and I fill my life with positivity at that moment, because if I don't, then I'll let the darkness actually consume me. There's a difference between darkness being around you and darkness being in you. It's just like you live in the world and not of the world. You can be in this world and not be of the world, as long as you don't let it in you. It's like a boat. You can visualize it. The only way the boat's going to sink is if the water gets in it. So this darkness could be a growth time. And to me, it gave Samson the perfect amount of time to think about what his next step was, because his calling was still to defeat the Philistines. Even though he was blind and he was bound, he still had that calling in his life. You know, I feel like Samson didn't have the luxury to turn lights back on, but he had to live in that darkness, so he found something to do. And that story continues. The Philistines brought Samson down to Gaza to bind him to 2 pillars in their temple and display him for the amusement of Philistine worshipers. Here, Samson prays to God and asks for his strength to return to him one more time. He said, God, just one more time. Just one more. I just need one more. God responds by sending Samson a final burst of strength. And Samson pushed back against the pillars and brought the entire temple down, killing himself and all of those in the temple with him. The Bible actually says in Judges 16:30 that those he killed at his death were more than the ones he killed in his lifetime. That one instance that he got that push of strength after all the dark time that he had, though it may have been his own problem, that's why he was in the darkness, it didn't matter. That darkness let him grow, and that growth let him pursue what God had called for him. You see, if God can use the jawbone of a donkey or the speech of an invalid, if God can use the dry bones to have flesh once again and create an army, if God, the same God who did all those things, allowed things to be taken from Job and still blessed him up 10 times more, if I can believe all of those stories, why can't he restore me? Why couldn't he strengthen me just one more time? All of those stories I brought to your attention today to let you know that's where you build your faith from, is from these stories. Why else would we have them? They're not just these princess and prince stories to just be here. It's the jawbone of a donkey. Like, who puts up that mess? Who would come up with that? Our Creator came up with that. Our Creator created that thought. I want to leave you with this. 2 Corinthians 10:4 says, the weapons we fight are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. Whatever your stronghold is, whatever it is, you have the power to overcome it. And if you need faith, just a little faith, take these stories and hold tight to them, because that's how you build it. And I know that everything sometimes seems to be against you. The year 2020 comes and swirls. It's insane and never stops. Whether it's a hurricane, people dying, or just the worst. When you know who is for you, It's hard to back down and succumb to the darkness. Samson had the perfect moment to stop, the perfect moment to say, this is it, and I'm done, and I've fulfilled my calling, because he did kill some Philistines. But instead, he grew, and he went forward, and he slew many. So I hope that this morning encouraged you just a little bit and found something knowledgeable for you. I can't wait to worship with you guys at 10:30, and I'll see you guys then.